All right, testing 1, 2, 3. Hello, hello. Is anybody out there? Let's see when you guys can hear me and we can get the show on the road. And oops, I got 2 of those open. I wonder what that means. I guess I better go back to that. Okay, looks good. The microphone says that I am transmitting, and we will see if that's true. What is this? No, we don't need that page open. You don't even know what that is. Close that page. Nerd Wallet. Why am I even having Nerd Wallet? Okay, I guess people can hear what I'm saying. All right, fantastic. So let's get this show on the road. Video, right? No one can see your screen. Click here. All right, when we can do the screening, then we'll be in good shape. Not the prettiest markets, unfortunately. Yet another disappointing day. Let's see. Dun, 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 dun. Yep. It's especially bad because we started off looking like something was going to happen and then it died real quick. So, you know, every time you get rejected off the, you know, when you have a significant point of resistance and you get rejected at it over and over and over again, it effectively strengthens it. Why does it strengthen it? Because more and more people start to use it as their point of resistance. So they say, well, we're going to buy below and then sell at that line, which is just what we do, except we don't need to wait for the chart to show us where it is. That's the big difference. So, you know, clearly we have a big problem if we're hardening up in the lower part of the range on the S&P, and I do this chart almost every day now. Let's see, that's the old one. There we go. So, you know, if we're hardening up down here and this becomes resistance, and of course we're going to start creating a range that's going to look more like this. That's going to be down here. And like I said, you know, I mean, look, and we're reviewing starting today. I'm starting to go back over these stocks, and I just did one in the chat room. Let's see. Let's get to that part. You know, but I mean, here's where we were like a month ago. Not, I mean, literally like 6 weeks ago at this point. So let's say 6 weeks ago. I'm sorry. A month ago we were here. 4 weeks before that we were here. That's basically how it is. It's not a month ago. It's 2 weeks ago. That's a terrible second half of the month. So yeah, 2 weeks ago we were here. A month before that we were there. But the signals are that we're heading back to here. That we're not. This progress is washing away. We'll see how far it goes and how long it takes. But it's not good. If we go to this thing, if I'm logged in, am I logged in? Store, help. Philip, yes, that's good. Okay. The NASDAQ, and that must be the one because it seems fairly new. Yep, okay. So, you know, in the big picture, we're still holding 12,000 on the NASDAQ, but where, you know, and you notice the pattern is very similar to what the S&P's pattern is. Where is the S&P? Did I lose that now? What happened? Default list, S&P. Well, that's the 2021. That can't be right. Oh, I see. It overwrites. Okay. I think it does. I don't know what it's doing, frankly. All right. March 2022, May 2022. May seems like the most. Okay. So if we take this pattern, this chart, and we put it next to this chart by doing this, there we go. See, this is weekly, and this is daily, but the daily, you're getting the same kind of action, right? See how this looks? See how it comes down, and see how it comes down and goes up and comes down, and makes a W, and the W fails, and it goes like that. That's what's happening on the daily. So it's foreshadowing what's happening on the weekly. And it's not good. If we're failing here, and this is 15,000 to 12,000, the exact middle is 13.5. So we're making this W, and if all goes well, now we could still go down to here and then start coming back up. That's possible on a weekly basis. That's very possible, because if we can get out of this thing in a certain amount of time. How long did it take to form this half of the W? So in other words, this downside of the W took, what is this? April. All right, so that's April. And this is, or this half goes into August. So basically, that's April, May, June, July. I don't know if you count August. I guess I count August. Let's say 5 months. So you got to start thinking, what's the likelihood over the next 5 months that we have enough good things happening to justify going back to where we were? And and you have to think of what's happening. Is the Fed going to stop tightening? No, not really. So if the Fed's not going to stop tightening, the war is not showing any signs of ending, and if the thing's dragging, and the more it drags out, it's not a static thing, because the more the war drags out, the more Europe is forced to deal with their crisis that they've depended way too much on Russia to supply them with natural gas. That means Russia has them by the balls, basically. So that's going to continue, and that's a big problem in Europe. And if it's a big problem in Europe, it's a big problem in Russia, and then that's affecting China because of the trade and everything else. So, and Africa and everywhere, all these countries around there. So it's a big problem in a big part of the world that we don't pay a lot of attention to, but it really matters a lot. That's not getting better. There's no particular sign. There's nobody even mentioning the word of peace talks or anything like that. Putin, as we've seen him have wars before, is happy to drag things out, and he thinks that he can outweight people. Which is, he thinks he can just, keep throwing troops and tanks and planes or whatever, and eventually the other guys will run out of money. Now, we've been funding the counteroffensive for Zelensky, and so have European countries, and we'll do that for X amount of time. But it's one of those things where somebody's going to come along, and especially one of these Russian troll politicians is going to come along and start saying, well, why are we spending all this money helping the Ukraine? It's not our war. We should get away, blah, blah, blah. You've seen them do that before. So anyway, 5-month window. No, it's not something you can say it's going to go away. Is COVID going to go away? No, COVID's not going to go away. Is inflation going to go away? No, inflation's not going to go away. We've talked before about the fact that we're in a multi-year cycle of rising wages. You're not going to be able to stop it, no matter what the Fed does, because because unless the Fed is going to cause a complete collapse of the economy so that prices go back down to some reasonable level. But meanwhile, there's no logic to that, because he's not going to cause, well, he would have to then cause a huge decline in demand. So the economy would have to collapse to the point where people are unemployed, can't afford to buy stuff, and then less people are driving cars, and there's less, materials used for buildings and so on and so forth, because the economy is frozen. If that's how they intend to cure inflation, that's great. It's not how you cure inflation. Okay, inflation is a supply and demand of product issue along with a liquidity issue. In other words, you always want the Jimi Hendrix autographed guitar that's in the glass case at the Hard Rock Cafe, right? You always want that. And if somebody said it's yours for $100, you would take it, right? And if somebody said it's yours for $1,000, you probably wouldn't take it. If somebody says it's yours for $10,000, you almost certainly wouldn't take it, even though it's got Jimi Hendrix autograph right on it, it's so cool and whatever. This is supply and demand. There's a guitar, it's got a signature on it, you want it, but how badly do you want it? And that depends also. Now, if you're Jeff Bezos and you want it, it doesn't matter whether it's 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000, you just buy it because you have liquidity. So liquidity is a major factor in supply and demand. If people have money, even though the Coke is now 50 cents a can instead of 40 cents a can, they are still going to buy it. You know, I honestly have no idea what Coke costs now. I'm not, I'm one of those people who doesn't look at numbers. But I remember when I used to buy it for the kids when they were home. When I buy sodas, it was 3 for $10. It was 3 12-packs for $10. So for $10, you get 36 sodas. It's like 30 cents a can, basically. So I'm saying if it's so in other words, now Coke is 50 cents a can when you're buying in the store. If you've got money, it doesn't matter. You're not going to not buy it because it went from 30 cents to 50 cents, which is what, 6.18. So it used to be 3 for 10, and now they're $18, and maybe on special be 14 or something like that. But still much more than 10. So there's, and again, simple examples, but it factors into everything, right? It factors into whether or not you're going to buy a house and whether or not you're going to do this. If you've got millions of dollars and somebody tells you the house is 200. If somebody tells you the house is $650,000 instead of $630,000 or $20,000, you think it's worth, you're not likely to sit there and freak out about the difference in price. Okay, but if you don't have that kind of money, and if the interest rates are sky high and so on and so forth, you make a very different kind of decision. So what I'm saying is, even if you froze inflation now, even if you just said there will be no more inflation, everything will stay the same price, that same price is still unaffordable. We've already done it. We've already had inflation. We've already raised prices 20%, let's say, over the last couple of years. So if we've already raised prices 20% over the last couple of years, what is the reaction of the workforce? They want 20% more money. They want the same stuff that they used to get. They don't want less stuff. In fact, that's number one consumer issue right now is the shrinkage, which I talk about. I talked about that a long time ago because that's like one of the early signs of inflation is shrinkage, because the first thing they do is give you less for the same money if they can. They put 3 less Doritos into a pack that used to have 20 Doritos, so they're saving themselves 6% on the Doritos. There's 3 less Doritos. So if they're saving 6% of the cost of Doritos, they can not raise the price so much or keep it about the same. And that's step one of how they do it. And the guy, I forget who it was. It was like either Kraft or Mondelez, but one of those guys who's in that business. Oh, Pepsi. It was a Pepsi guy. They talked about, he was really open, having a great conversation on Bloomberg where he was talking about like, yeah, we try this, we try that. He goes, it's not evil. He was basically saying, he's like, we're not being evil. We just try to figure out what we can provide, what we can afford to provide the customer, and what the customer is willing to pay. So it's not like they're messing around with you. They're basically saying you like to buy a bag of Doritos for $3. In a bag of Doritos, there's 20 chips. If you don't want it to be $3.30, then we have to put 27 chips. We have to put 17 chips in the Dorito bag instead of 20. Now we put it on the shelf and we see if people say, okay, I don't mind that. That's a fair trade. All right, that's what they do. They try different stuff. Then maybe they'll try a bigger bag. Maybe they'll try a bigger bag for more money. They said got to raise it to $4. So What are we going to do? We're going to charge $4, but we're going to make a slightly bigger bag with slightly more chips, and we'll call them Doritos Extra, and hopefully people buy that. They try different stuff to see what they can do to get people to keep buying Doritos at the same rate. So Pepsi is just as concerned as you are about the rising prices, but the reality is you don't have to say, your limitation is very different. Pepsi's limitation is they have to sell things at a profit. If you look at Pepsi, where's my thing? Oh man, that's my favorite. PEP. Oh, what the hell? Okay, so you look at Pepsi, and they do 62 billion sales, 6 billion in profit, 63.6, 64.12. Wow, they're all over the place. 67.7, 77. Anyway, so roughly 10% to the bottom line, and who knows what happened here? You know, it's like, so basically they're trying to get 10% to the bottom line. So are they accomplishing that? And to do that, they have to be like product by product by product. Everything they do has to have a 10%. With Apple, they won't sell a product that can't make 35%. They don't care how good it is. If they can't make 35% selling it, they don't do it. This goes back from day one of the company. That was an ironclad rule. They wouldn't sell an accessory. They wouldn't sell a program. They wouldn't sell a computer. If it makes more, that's fine. But 35% was their limit. There was nothing that they would put out that was less than 35%. So in other words, if you had to buy a Mac and the mouse was separate, the mouse had to make 35%. And frankly, if they couldn't figure out how to sell you a mouse for 35%, they wouldn't sell you the mouse. They'd tell you to go somewhere else and buy the mouse. Apple did not mess around with that. That was an ironclad law. And well, look where it got them too. But obviously, retailer can't be, manufacturer can't be that strict about their profits. But anyway, so 10% to the bottom line is great. Pepsi's got to make 10%. So when their costs go up, and the Dorito bag that they were selling for $3 and making 30 cents is now $3 and they only make 12 cents, they have got to raise the price. And if they make it, and then if they go from $3 to $3.30, now there's 40 cents in the $3.30. It's just about right for them. That's where they need to be. Not to mention, though, also they have to think ahead and say, is this going to go down? Is this the same thing we're doing? Is it going to go down? Is it going to go up in the future? What's going to happen? What's the corn harvest look like coming ahead? So on and so forth. They got to worry about all that shit too. They got to worry about the price of shipping. They got to worry about the trucking, the cost of refrigeration if there's, if it's refrigerated. All these things factor in. So that's their variable. Now, your variable is, what other things do you have to buy? So we were talking yesterday about Europe, and in Europe, people are spending, let's say, for example, they were spending $200 a month for electricity. Now they're spending $600 a month for electricity, $800 a month. Let's say $600. So now they have to come up with $400 more a month for the electric bill. They don't have a choice. You know, they can't really cut back much more. And Europeans are pretty efficient compared to us. They can't really cut back on what they're doing, electricity-wise. Then they've got their gas goes up, your rent goes up, right? All these things are fixed costs. You can't get away from these costs, not easily. You know, I'm dealing with a lot of people down here. We talk about rents all the time because people's rents are going up like crazy. And you know, if you want to not pay your rent, let's say you have an apartment and it's $3,000 a month, and now their landlord raises the rent to $3,500. So now you need $500 more a month. But what's your alternative? You're either going to give them $500 a month more and renew your lease here, or you're going to move. Moving costs you a couple of $1,000s at least, not to mention the hassle and everything else. And then you're going to move to a place that you probably don't like as much, otherwise you would have been there in the first place, because you know, basically people coming down here to retire. So you're moving to a place you don't like it as much, and then those guys are going to raise the rent next year, and you'll be in the same boat. And so you know, if you look at the cost of moving and it's not going to really do much more than a Band-Aid, you almost kind of have to stay. But then what's happening? Then you're incurring this additional expense of $500 a month. So you got $500 a month for the rent and a couple of $100 for utility, for the energy. Let's say $400 for the energy. Let's say and then obviously certain food things have gotten more expensive. Now you can jiggle food around by just eating less expensive food, but it's, you know, painful when you have to start doing that. But you have to start, so people have to start making choices. And so when you're thinking about the companies that you're investing in now, you've got to think about where they stand on that choice chain. So that's the side thing. I don't want to get into that now, but that's something you got to consider is where do these people stand on the choice chain? How optional is the thing they're selling for consumers? Can they cut it out completely? Can they cut it back? Can they switch to a lower cost item? You got to think about that like a consumer when you're looking at these companies that we're investing in, because these choices are being made constantly now by consumers every day. And it's a death by 1,000 cuts the way this happens. It's a long drawn out process. That's why the Fed is trying to quickly get it under control. But it's already not under control. We're 2 years into this. We looked at a chart a couple of weeks ago. There are mandatory minimum wage increases coming into effect, because forget that. Can you imagine trying to do all this on a $600 a week salary, $15 an hour, 40 hours a week, $600 a week? That's the proposed minimum wage. Okay, that's what they hope to get it to. Right now, there are plenty of states that are paying half of that are paying $300 a week for 40 hours worth of work. Less taxes, FICA, Social Security, and whatever. $300 a week. And they got to find a way to live in an apartment and heat their homes and so on and so forth. Oh, yeah. And what about phone? We thought about the necessity of phone, cable. You know, I mean, in other words, if you want, you can't expect everybody to go home to like an empty apartment and sit in their chair waiting for the next workday. I mean, it's essentially slavery. It's wage slavery. There's no pleasure in that life. There's no vacations. You can give them vacation time, but what are they going to do with it? It's, people of that level of vacation is time they don't get paid. You can't take 2 weeks off when you have no money. Anyway, so the pressure, and it's coming from it already happened years ago, starting to address the minimum wage. There's already laws in place, so they're ratcheting it up. But that was based on ratcheting it up in such a way that we would catch up to the cost of the last 40 years. So let's inflation over time. Okay, well, let's see if we can make that bigger. So here's 100 years of inflation. This goes to 2021. All right, so it wasn't crazy in 2021. It is now crazy. Now we're up to, wow. Now we're up to here. We're up to almost 10%, 8% at least up here. And last year, as we know, is bullshit. I'm not sure actually where they got this number from. I'm sure it was higher than that last year. But over 2 years, we're a good 15% up. And that's on the Fed's measurement. And there's plenty of people who will tell you that that's bullshit anyway. Now, we have had inflation. This is when I was a kid. This is why when I was a kid, I remember you either got a raise or you quit your job and got another job that paid you more money. There is no way when inflation is 10% a year, pretty much every year, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years in a row. So all the time until basically I was in the middle of college. So 9 years in a row from the time I was 8 Well, no, from the time I was 9, basically. So from when I was 9 until 20, basically, there was massive inflation all the time. You know, so this is so for me, I'm used to this stuff. Look at the 20s, we had deflation. That's what that's essentially what the Fed has to do. Because if you don't do this, you have to raise wages. This is what I'm saying. I've lived through this. Okay, you have to raise wages. People will not work for you at a certain point. You will start finding you can't get people to work for you. This is why you hear employers complaining, can't get people to work. You can't get people to work at the bullshit salaries you're trying to give them. But then if you have to pay people more money, you're going to have to raise all your prices, and that's going to cause more inflation. And that's what happens. That's a cycle. This is a cycle the Fed is trying to avoid. I don't know that it's avoidable because the problem is from 2000, right, until 2020, for 20 years, we have had very, very little inflation, under, basically 2.5% or less inflation. And what it is we're trying to address the very small increases in the minimum wage that have been enacted into law are made to address the fact that they weren't keeping up with this inflation. This inflation now, what we actually have now up here is leapfrogging any attempt to make the wages better. So that's the thing I should have looked at. So let's take a look at inflation and minimum wage. Inflation adjusted value of the minimum wage is probably the same thing. Yeah. So the minimum wage in 2020 dollars has kept pace. If it had kept pace, that's productivity. That doesn't count. Okay, that's obviously a good argument for something, but it doesn't help. The inflation adjusted minimum wage is, what is that number? What are you trying to say? The minimum wage should be 24. I mean, and that's somebody who wrote this article last year in March. Oh, I see. So they're saying that the inflation adjusted value of the minimum wage. So in other words, if you adjust for inflation, the minimum wage has gone down 75 cents, almost 10% from 1950. There was a time when it was up 50% in the 60s because of what? Unionization, right? We had unions and they passed minimum wage. They just started passing minimum wage laws. When I used to work, there was like, I remember $1.15 an hour. I'm pretty sure that was my first minimum wage that I remember being conscious of. And it went from 115 to 165 to 2 something, and then they just kept bringing it up, trying to make it right, but it wasn't able to keep up with inflation. And then of course, then Reagan came in, busted the unions, creating most of these minimum wage jobs became impossible to unionize, and they lost all their power. But look what it did for the corporations, right? They used to have to shell out a lot of money. That's a new thing, so let's get rid of that. So federal only, federal, state, and local, changes in the real value of the minimum wage, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so the point is, it's not keeping up with inflation. It never kept up with inflation. The adjustments they made were meant to keep it up like this. In 68, the minimum wage was only $1.60 an hour. Why do I remember 115? Well, it wasn't my job. That would be $12.80 today, and I'm not sure what date this is. But the point is, whatever you want to measure it, $15 an hour was conservative, trying to get you back to a number that made sense to people, that somebody could at least say, this is a job. $15, $600 a week, not great, but at least it's $30,000 a year. And if 2 people are making a minimum wage in a family, they have $60,000 a year, which gets towards about the average of the median American household, not average median. And they can sort of kind of afford to live And again, before housing exploded, because now housing and rents are out of control and they can't afford to live anyway. So, you know, when push comes to shove, people need to live, and they will push back. No matter how much you neuter them, no matter how much you hammer home the rhetoric, you know, like you know, Fox News and stuff like that is trying to tell you how you shouldn't complain, and God bless the corporate masters and blah blah blah, and the rich shouldn't pay taxes and this and that. It's all fine and good when everybody's got a full belly. But when people start starving and when people start having to choose things, like whether to take their medicine, you know, whether to take their prescription medicine or buy dinner for the kids, that's when you start getting problems. That's when people start grumbling and complaining and getting angry. And after a while, viva la revolution. And you need and you need it. You need it from time to time. As Jefferson said, a good democracy should have a revolution every 20 years, because you can't let the people in power become complacent. They have to know that the people will throw them out if they can't make the people happy. And you can't make the people happy long term, especially if you have these people who are lifetime politicians all the time. So anyway, where were we? We were talking about that. Oh yeah, right. So in the 5-month cycle, boy, that was a long detour. In the 5 months going forward, is inflation going to stop? Not at all. No. We are going to be dealing with cycles of high inflation for a long time. Even if the Fed stops or turns the economy down, still people have to eat. Their policy isn't feeding people. Actually, their policy makes things worse, because it makes your credit card debt is more expensive. So now everybody who has credit card debt, which is everybody who's poor, can't afford 18, 19, 20% interest on their credit cards. You know, 20%, it's more than 20. I mean, I don't know what the number is anymore, but it's, you know, you're talking 2% a month is your interest on your debt. 2% a month, like a loan shark. That's really a crazy number. And it's not dischargeable via bankruptcy. We changed those laws also and screwed everybody. So basically, you know, people just charge, you know, they get into debt. They can't afford their bills anymore. And we see the consumer debt rising and rising and rising. And it's a charge off. Now, they're relieving student loans, right? They're giving $10,000 off on student loans. That program is only really about $25 billion a year. So when they talk about how it's going to cause inflation, that's, you know, completely asinine. It's not even from reality. It's going to, you know, it's going to give some people, it'll give people less debt. Giving people less debt doesn't mean they're going to run out and start throwing money at things. And it's only $25 billion. We put 12 trillion into the economy since COVID began in stimulus. So we're going to talk about 25 billion like it's going to make it like it's going to ruin the world. But of course, again, this is what they do on Fox, right? So you hear it all the time. So anyway, so there's nothing I see ahead that makes me think, oh, it's an NASDAQ chart we're looking at, wasn't it? There's nothing I see ahead in the next 5 months that makes me think we're going to break up here, that we're going to suddenly have a party and fly higher. It's just not likely. We are much more likely to start falling down around this level. We'll be lucky to hold this line. You know, if we hold 11,000, we're in better shape than we deserve. And again, it's discretionary, right? If you're, you know, you have to think again, and when you're investing in companies, if I'm poor, can I afford Netflix and Hulu and Apple and I don't know, whatever else it is you subscribe to for things, you know, like, so, you know, and I have a smart TV, so of course that means I have no channels that I don't subscribe to, so I have to pay for, I pay for YouTube Plus to get the regular channels. That's apparently how you get the regular channels. Hulu's regular channels are all delayed, can't watch anything live, so I need to watch CNBC. So for that I have to pay all this money. Well, I could watch it on Thinkorswim. So we're used to anyway. They used to have a box for it. Oh well, can't see it there. How's my silver doing? Not good. Ugh, should have sold. Index is not doing good either. So there's nothing really here that indicates that in the next 5 months we should be here. Therefore, if we shouldn't be here, where are we going to be? Well, we probably can't even get over this line. That's a 50-week moving average, so that's what the 200-day moving average would be. It's about the same, right? Although the 50-week is, well, yeah, 50 weeks is going to be, it's trading days, so you have to think 50 times 5. It's really 250, right? So, because it's 50 weeks of 5 trading days, whereas the 200-day moving average is 200 trading days moving average. They don't go by actual weeks. So tricky, right? So anyway, so and that's the 200-week moving average down here. So it's not, you know, we should be able to hold up here, and that's good because honestly, this is you know, an okay range. And then you got to look at the S&P chart, which again oh yeah, right, I had it on the side screen. I knew I had it somewhere. There it is. So then you look at the S&P chart, and you say, well, we'd have to do the weekly, but conceptually, the S&P is likely to hold up and not go too far below its range. So hopefully it'll hold up in this area. And that's not terrible. And again, it doesn't matter so much, you know, when you're investing, it doesn't matter what the indexes are doing, except that there are so many stocks that are indexed and trading with the indexes that, you know, in other words, like ETFs and whatever's in funds will sell your stock in proportion to the S&P, regardless of the stock's actual performance. Doesn't care. The algorithms do not care about your stock. Okay, it's like it's just like when you blanket fire people and don't, you know, not based on performance. You say we're cutting this entire department. It's like, well, what about Dave? Dave's fantastic. Dave is the best guy there. He could be the president of the company. And they're like, right, no, all cut out. You know, and that drives you crazy, right? Because you're throwing out a perfectly good guy with a department that's just not working for whatever reason. But it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with Dave. Dave's great. Why should he get fired? Why? It's not his fault. He's still doing great. He does great stuff. He's productive. He makes money. Still, they fire Dave. It makes no sense. Drives me crazy every time I see companies doing stuff like that. You know, they don't review. You don't cut a whole department and not review and throw people out where they could transfer their skills. So the problem is, so we don't have much to go. In fact, actually, it's easier to do a percentage. So let's do a percentage. You're only talking about going from 12.3 to 11 and probably holding 11, therefore 10%. So therefore, when we look at the S&P and we say 4,036, so basically back to this line. And this is not the same chart I used in the morning. Isn't that interesting? Because I had numbers on here, 3680. So 3680 should hold. So we should be okay with our range. And last time we were down here, we saw a lot of stocks that we really, really liked. Like a lot. So most we've wanted to buy in a long time. So we were very happy down here to be buying. If we come back down here again, we're going to want to make sure we have a good bottom. And you're talking a long wait though. Look how long this took. We went up from here, and that's 3 weeks. Oh, well, we already said that, right? 6 weeks total to come from top to bottom. We're about halfway down, so another 3 weeks. before we actually get to the bottom, and then we're going to want to, you know, we'll hopefully get something like this and consolidate, and we'll have a good couple of weeks there. So we're talking 8 weeks from now before we start saying, you know what, this is a good bottom, we should be buying. So it's going to be very dull 8 weeks, because, you know, unless something changes, unless something, one of these things change that we didn't expect to change, that's where we're going to be. We're going to be in a steady, slow decline. Things are not going to get particularly better. It's unlikely the Fed is going to say, hey, we did enough tightening, let's all have a party now. That's super unlikely. I mean, the Fed has said they're at 2.2% now. They have said 3.5% to 4%. So if they're at 2.2 now and they tighten 7.5, that brings them to basically 3. And then they're saying that by next year, they want to be at 3.5 to 4. So you have to assume that they're going to want to do at least another half point, maybe 2 half points in the next couple of meetings at the end of the year. So that's not really going to calm things down. But on the other hand, the market is treating it like they're going to hike 75, 75, 75 forever. That's not going to happen either, because you're going to math. Okay, 3% after 2 weeks in 3 weeks, and then that means the next 50-point hike puts you at 3.5%. That's the low end of their target range. 4% is the high end. And I think there's only 2 meetings after September. Yep, 2 meetings after. So 3% here, 3.5%, 4%. They might give us a Christmas present and do 2.5 in December. But again, that would be data dependent. They're going to want to see what the data looks like. If the inflation is still out of control, they're not going to do that. They're not going to do it because they've got to avoid this. They can't allow this to happen. This is a crazy thing. Now, how did the market do between 1971 and 1982? That's a good question, right? You can probably see that on Yahoo. We can find Yahoo. There's Yahoo. Wow, is this actually working? What's it doing? Oh, that is sad. Oh yeah, great. Okay. So 71. Well, can we make it bigger? How does this work? Oh, plus, great. There you go. So here's 71 to 82, flat. All right, that's what we have to look forward to with rising inflation. Even now, of course, if the market was flat, that means effectively it lost value, right? If inflation is 10% every year and your investment in stocks is flat for 10 years, you're way behind. All right, and that's why we've been focusing lately on these dividend type strategies, because you have got to create a return from your stocks, whether they're going up or not. You cannot count on your stocks increasing in value in order to give yourself a return. And you've got to be very, very selective. I mean, of course, during from 1971 to 1982, were there stocks that went up? Of course there were. There were tons of stocks that did well, but the index on the whole suffered from inflation for year after year after year. And you see what's going on now, how these companies have problems adjusting, and because they've got to raise the wages and the prices go up because other people had to raise the wages, and then they start and the material costs go up, and then they've got to raise their prices, and they raise their prices, and now because their suppliers raise their prices, they now have to have the employees come to them again and say you got to raise wages again. It was every freaking year. You know, and you always got a 10% raise, and you always got a 2-week bonus every single year. 2 weeks is 5%. So every year you would get a 10% raise and a 5% bonus at the end of the year. And if you didn't get that, you would just walk and get another job, because there were people always looking for jobs for employees. Even when we had high unemployment rates, still you wouldn't take this bullshit from people. Now, once it got under control, what happened is we were still giving raises out. That took a while to peter out. So people were still expecting raises every year. That was a habit that was embedded after a decade of getting it. And that put a lot of money in people's pockets and led to some really good, solid growth down here. Then we had the internet boom into the 90s, and they were huge. I mean, the changes. This is the not industrial, but whatever you call it, technological revolution that was like the industrial revolution. I mean, it just created incredible increases in productivity at that time. So, that's different than what was going on in the base economy. That was just a complete change in the world. So you can't compare it. But anyway, so that's where we are. But how is the Fed magically gonna save this? It's not. Okay, because when they raise their rates, they raise the cost of borrowing, which makes it more expensive for people to live their lives. And where does money come from? It either comes from your relatives, right? It doesn't really come from your friends. That's a pretty rare occasion, right? Generally, it's going to come from your relatives, who are, and I mean significant money, not little money. So either, relatives who retire and leave money. Remember when people used to get retirement money? I mean retirement money, sorry. Inheritance. So people used to get inheritance money, and it used to be some pretty good money. And lots of people got money for inheritances. These days, most people are supporting their parents. People in the bottom 60%, or at least the bottom 60%, they end up supporting their parents as they get older. Their parents move into the house. They don't have a penny when they die. People are freaking out about how they can afford funerals and things like that. There's no inheritance, because the generations retiring now, the boomers, didn't really, accumulate a lot of wealth, and prices now are gouging that. What little they had is being sucked away. So that money's no longer available. Social Security obviously no longer covers what it used to cover. You can't live in a house based on your $2,000 a month Social Security. So where's the other money come from when you have no income and if you don't have a lot of savings? And the average American, by the way, has $40,000 saved for retirement. $40,000. That's a scary thing. So, these things are not getting better. And as we know, if Social Security collapses, imagine the loss there. It's about $2 trillion. Social Security and Medicare are probably $3 trillion between them. So imagine taking that out of the, you could say it'll collapse and, oh, good, we didn't like the system, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, how are you going to replace $3 trillion worth of spending? It's half of all consumer spending in the United States. Consumers spend $6 trillion a year. Consumers are 2/3 of the economy. How are you going to replace that if you let Social Security die? It will destroy the US economy. It'll destroy the global economy. And people sit there and talk about it's about time we end that program, blah, blah, blah. And do what? What's going to happen when 10 million senior citizens can't pay their rent anymore? It's not like their kids have the money to cover it. You know, I'm saying 10 million that can't afford it. Not, you know, maybe 10 million can, but half of them are going to have nothing. And then what? And then you're not going to pay for their hospitalization. You're not going to pay for their medicine. You're not going to pay for their drugs. We're going to have them die in the streets. Because nobody thinks these things forward. We can't do this. It is not an option to just stop doing it. It doesn't balance the budget. It destroys the entire country. But again, it's the Russian propaganda machine that puts out these social media things and these memes that gets people all riled up, and they start parroting all this stuff. And it's basically it's designed to destroy the country. It's not helping anybody. There's no political points being gained here. This is insanity. See if anybody has questions. Nobody has questions. Fantastic. Let's see what else we're talking about. All right, so prospects, not that great. So the key is to pursue something like when did we talk about that thing? This is not even now, is it? Oh, 1 month of gains gone. No, it is now. Why does it seem like it's not? There's money talk. When did I talk about that? We talked about that strategy for making money on retirement. $700 something. Let's see. Let's try finding Phil's posts. There they are. How to become a millionaire, I think. Okay, so you know, it's kind of becoming a thing I'm concerned about. So I'm trying to figure out ways to like explain to people what they need to do. And it's got to start somewhere. So I'm making it like as cheap as possible so people understand. You know, so not to go over the whole thing, you can always read it. But if you say $700 a month and we can make 18% a year, okay, so you start out with $700. At the end of 12 months, you add $8,400, right? You do that for 30 years, make 18% a year, and that's $8 million. This is very doable. All right. Now, 30 years from now, hopefully $8 million is still a lot of money, but it shouldn't be nothing. If you only make 8%, it's $1 million. So you really have to figure out how to make 18% steady returns. This is what we do in our dividend portfolio, right? And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to teach people, and even if it's going to take me 10 years of articles, I think I want to teach people how this works. I'm going to month by month track this in portfolios and show them exactly how you do it and how you add it. But for you guys, we can accelerate the process a bit. Let's see. All right, so here's our dividend portfolio. I didn't cut out the things we cut out yet. You know, it's all a similar strategy to what I was talking about in that other article, though. So in the article, I'm talking about $700 a month. In the dividend portfolio, that's that one? Yeah. So this one. Make sure I know where everything is. What? Here's that. Where'd that just go? Oh, the portfolio we were looking at. I was thinking we were looking at another PhilStockWorld page. Anyway, so in the dividend portfolio, it's the same thing as we're doing here, except that we generally buy it right off. We don't leg into it bit by bit by bit. We buy the positions, and but we're doing effectively the same thing. It's just that we have more than $700 a month. So if you have money in advance. Oh, and by the way, I mean, if you have to realize in these compound rate calculators, again, I didn't talk about it because I don't want to confuse the issue for the people who I'm targeting this to. But if you have the compound rate calculator, and I like the Money Chimp one, it's the easiest to work with, that one. So we were talking about $700 a month, $8,400 a year, 30 years, 18%, calculate 8 million bucks. Okay. Now, what if you started with $7,000 instead? Watch this. 8.8 million. It's so critical at the beginning to start with something. So what we're doing is we're, and that was what, that's like 10% more. So we start with something, and the more you start with, the better. So I'm telling you, and especially guys, if you have money, you got to set these up for your grandkids or kids if they're young, or it doesn't matter if they're young or not young. Okay, it's just a thing that should be set up. Forget giving them money when they retire. Start building something now. Put an IRA out for them now, a 401k, an IRA, whatever, and put in the money every year and put it into, even if you just do something stupidly boring like S&P indexing, anything, the S&P indexing will be 8%. All right, and it's still going to be $1.1 million in 30 years. All right, so it's like you started off with a nice lump sum that you can, which isn't, I mean, the IRA, I think the limit's about 7. You start out with a lump sum, you put in as much as you can every year, and you teach them to do it as well. That's the trick, is you've got to get them into the habit, because obviously you can't fund everything. But in reality, you're putting in 8,400 bucks. You're basically giving them $250,000 over 30 years. That's the point. Or you're starting them off at least to get them to the point where they can have $250 a year every 30 years. And you have to say to them, look, I'm going to be able to give you this money for the first 10, 15 years. You've got to go after that. You've got to have a goal to replace that money and keep it going, because if you do that, you're going to have a fantastic life. You'll always have this great amount of money to fall back on. And to some extent, it'll adjust with inflation, but not if you just put it into S&P indexes. You've got to be smarter than that, and you've got to teach them to be smarter than that. I mean, that's the key. But you can play with these and see what the effect is. I mean, if you put in, let's say if you put in $25,000 into an account and nothing else gets put in for 30 years, that's still going to be $250,000. That's following the S&P. The trick is to start early. That's the most important thing. Start with a number you can deal with early. And, instead of, I see people all the time, they buy this bullshit stuff for the kids and they do this and that. And meanwhile, the kid doesn't have it doesn't have a college fund. They don't have a retirement account. That's a lot more important. So, if you can afford it, you really got to think about planning for the real future, because so many people just end up not having one. And you can, you look, I mean, look what just happened with COVID. You can imagine all these scenarios about how successful your kids are going to be and how they're going to go to the best school and blah, blah, blah. My kids went to the best school, closed. It was basically closed for 2 years while they were in school. Will that affect their jobs down the road and so on and so forth? I don't know, but it's got to be a little harder to compete when you didn't have 2 proper years of college and other people did. I'm sure it's going to show up in some way. But but saving not just for yourself, but for you've got to do it for the family also. I mean, that's just critical, and you got to start early, because the earlier you start. Because look at this, if you do, let's say you do, let's say you start out with $1,000, and let's say you put in $500 a month, $6,000, and let's say let's say your kid's just born now, right? So you got a brand new grandchild, you put in $1,000, you pledge to put $500 a month into the fund and drip it in, and you give it 50 years. So 50 years from now, when they turn 50, $3.7 million, and you will have put in $300,000, and that's at 8%. That's just following the S&P. All right. Meanwhile, if your strategy is that when you're older and you die, you will then leave them money, unless you're going to leave them $3.7 million. And also, and also think about that too. It's like, you know, your cash can be put to better use. And so, and again, it's easy because somebody was just discussing that in chat, and they're like, you know, not here, is in Seeking Alpha. Somebody's talking about it. They're like, you know, dude, you know, because somebody said, hey, where am I going to get $700? And somebody's like, dude, as long as you're not earning minimum wage, we'll find a way for you to have $700 a month. You know, it's like you can cut back. Everybody learns to cut back. People go bankrupt and they learn to cut back on all kinds of crap. All of a sudden, things are very, very different. So the key is to start off early and put it into something that's going to be there for them, and that down the road as they move on in life, they'll be able to use that. Instead of having to rely on other people, they'll be able to use that money as a guarantee for loans, so that'll keep their borrowing costs down because they've got the money in a savings account that's there. And by the way, this seems like a lot of money, but it was funny because back in the 70s we used to have 10, 12, 15% bond rates. You could get a 30-year bond at 15% at one point. I mean, imagine that. So then if you were guaranteed 15% for a 30-year bond, oh, I'm sorry, let's say you put let's say you gave a $25,000 bond, no addition, at 15%, that's $1.6 million. So there was a point. Now, once bonds get to that point, you really got to buy the bonds, because it's again, you can't sustain these rates. Warren Buffett, in all his 50 years of playing the markets, has averaged 16% returns. But the key is that's the average. That means if he has a bad year, he also has some good years. That's why, again, indexing, following the index on the S&P is not necessarily the way to go. They average 8%. So he's beating the S&P by 100% on the average, pretty much year in and year out. And that's the difference between selecting good value stocks and just, throwing your money into a thing. So we all have to work on that. And then so today we were talking about, so that's why we're concentrating on stocks that are hopefully bulletproof over the long term. And we talked about Levi today. So it doesn't have to be a dividend paying stock. That's the point I was going to make. It doesn't have to be a dividend paying stock. It can be, what the hell? Is this today? Oh, yeah. Okay, I know what I did. So it doesn't have to be a dividend paying stock. And where'd all the pictures go? That's weird. I think if I refresh, it'll come back. Yep. So it doesn't have to be dividend paying stock, but it has to be a stock that is going to be around for a long time. It has to be a stock that you can't see it going much lower. Meanwhile, Levi's going lower as we speak. So I'm looking at Levi's. People always want to buy jeans. Crocs, people always want to buy shoes, especially cheap shoes. Williams-Sonoma is for rich people, but not, look at this crash on them. They went down hard. Restoration Hardware also crashing. So all of a sudden people think rich people aren't gonna have money either. Best Buy, down. But people need electronics. People do this. Trox is titanium oxide. This is basically people think business is going to be. Is the market much worse than when we started? Yeah. I'm like these stocks are way too off to be. These stocks are way too off to be a flat market. Now Netflix is one of the ones I'm talking about. When you're deciding what you want to do, and this is why I picked Netflix actually as a hold, because Netflix is so beaten down, and people just love Netflix. And I think it would be very low on the list of things they want to give up. And Netflix is doing this commercial thing, but I thought it was going to be a free commercial thing, but it's not. They're actually charging still $8 a month. So it's cheaper which makes a difference to people. So in fact, that's kind of goes back to the Pepsi thing, right? Netflix used to charge $8 a month. Now they charge $12, $15 a month, whatever the hell it is. So now they charge $15 a month. Then, so they're saying to people, okay, if you want it to still be $8, this is what Pepsi does, right? If you want it to still be $8, here's the sacrifice you got to make. You got to watch some commercials. Not many commercials, like 5 minutes worth of commercials each hour, but you got to watch some commercials because we can't afford to provide it to you for free. But you don't, and you can't afford $12. So let's figure out what works. And I think it's a great compromise. They're still going to get their revenue, and they're going to get the commercial revenue to make up for it. So people are really undervaluing them here because they've come up with a great solution to keep their customer base happy. Ford, you know, I hate to use Tesla as an example of how things should be, but in theory, Tesla makes more than 10% per car that they sell. Ford makes 2% per car that they sell. So does every other automaker. So are the now, what does Tesla have that other companies don't have? And again, I think a lot of it is bullshit accounting. I think a lot of it is that they're manipulating their carbon credits and so on and so forth. But either way, let's give it to them. Let's say there's a better way. So if what Tesla is doing is true, and every company is going to eventually electrify their fleet and be all electric like Tesla, okay, they're also going to automate their plants like Tesla, and they're going to get the same credits and government things like Tesla, carbon credits and so on and so forth like Tesla. So all these guys are going to be in the same business. And they're not going to lose out to Tesla. Tesla's not going to take over and start making all the cars in the world. That's not what's going to happen. It's going to be Ford and General Motors and Tesla and Jaguar and whoever, and everybody's going to have electric bases. You know, so clearly, and you know, clearly, if you look at there's no engine. I mean, effectively, an electric car is like your old Hot Wheels electric cars, right? They would be they would be battery, or they work on the track that have like the little electric thing on the track, and they go super fast and fly all over the place. Great, but they were simple. You could take, because how do they work? Well, they were really simple because you could take the whole plastic top off, and all you had was that little base. That was the sled, basically, the sled with the tires, and that would make the car go. So there's way less parts than an internal combustion engine, way less things to go wrong. It's a very, very simple design, and that saves money. So if, you know, so to the extent that Tesla does make more money selling cars, it's because they're using electric cars and charging a fortune for them, of course. That's the issue, is whether or not long term the competition will sustain those kind of margins on electric cars when everybody's making them. But either way, Ford is going to do fine in the long term. They're going to make tons of money, make tons of cars, and electrification is going to help their bottom line, not hurt it. Because they're always tooling up to make new cars. They're always adjusting their assembly lines. It's not a huge thing. It's not like Tesla starting from scratch, because Ford, Toyota, GM, they're always doing different things and automating themselves over time. They're just going to now push more in that direction, which is, by the way, going to cause massive unemployment, but besides that. All right, so Sony is another basic consumer stock. I don't think people are going to give up. Big Lots, people liked the earnings yesterday, and today they're crashing, 10% down. Mittal Steel, this is also down based on the economy. Not down from where we picked it when we picked it at the time, but down. And Logitech, computer accessories, again, it's not a thing that's heavily price sensitive. When you need a mouse, you need a mouse. When you need a keyboard, you need a keyboard. So you go to Staples and you buy it, end of story. Right? You don't sit there and price. You don't go from store to store to store looking for like a cheaper mouse. You know, you might look on Amazon or something like that. But you know, when you need, and Amazon is still selling the same Logitech mice anyway. So it's just a question of where you buy it and whatever. But it's not something where they're going to be suffering from inflation or whatever. Disney, gangbuster numbers. I mean, just it's crazy that they're being sold off so much. So we'll see. They'll recover over time. IMAX got hit hard. They were doing good, and then all of a sudden, all the way back down again. But we talked about that because they have there's a very soft fall movie selection, and it won't be until winter when they have some more blockbusters. So the numbers are very exciting for IMAX, and of course, China being shut is the big thing there. Tenet Healthcare, holy crap, hospitals. This is a phenomenal buy. There's another one, absolutely great buy. And JP Morgan is JP Morgan. They're the, you know, the people who move major amounts of money around the world, pretty much it's either JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs. You know, in Europe, they might use Credit Suisse. Deutsche Bank lost a lot of business because their reputation went to crap. And not that other people are any better. HSBC and others have problems too. But, you know, Goldman and JP Morgan, they tend to be not so scandally. And but capable. The point is they're capable and trustable for moving massive amounts of money, and not too many other people are. So those are the guys we are looking at. So far, I just looked at the first one closely, Levi's, and what we said about them. As I talked about, we did the math as far as like the price of cotton and how it affected their earnings and what the bottom line is and what we expect for the year going forward and so on and so forth and what a proper price is and all in all. Anyway, when all is said and done with Levi, oh, that's not Levi. Where's their chart? That's not going to be their chart. There. So when all is said and done with Levi, we don't think they're going to go way up, but we don't think they're going to go much lower than this either. And we think they're going to be around for another decade. So if they're around for another decade and they're not going to go much lower, then it kicks back to that premise we have. And let me see if I got a spot I can write this in. I guess I'll write it down here. Subscribe. Oh, I'm not logged in. You kidding me? Log in. Yay, I'm accepted. All right. There it is. Okay. All right. So what's our plan? Our plan is, whoops. Okay. So as a new trade, here's where we're going to start. So let's just copy this and drop it down. Did all the math. Oh, this is a very important point though. So the original spread was $1,150 net cash, right? We sold 20 puts and we bought 50 of the bull call spreads. We thought Levi would do better. It hasn't. Cotton prices went crazy and it hurt us. And that's what we did the math on here. It's going to continue. It's still expensive, so it's going to continue to be a little worse bottom line than we thought. So we're rolling the 18s down. Now, we started out with 1150. An allocation block in the long-term portfolio is $100,000 basically. So we have $200,000, you know, double on margin. So we have a $200,000 spending power ability. We don't like to use it, but we have that available. So when we start a position for 1,150 in cash, and all we're doing is selling 2018 puts, that's $36,000 worth of puts, right? That we would be if we were assigned. So we've now used 36,000 of our $200,000 allocation block. So that means that if Levi drops to half, drops to $9, let's say from 18. Or let's say $7. Let's say $7. Let's say it drops horrendously, it loses $10 out of 17. All right, so what's going to happen? Well, then we have 2,000 shares at 18, but now the stock is at 7. So unless we think Levi's is going bankrupt, we just buy more shares. So we spend another $36,000 divided by 7. We're not doubling up the number of stock, but we could buy 5,000 more shares for that price. So then we're going to double our exposure to Levi's. Doesn't matter what the stock price is, it matters what our allocation block looks like. So we're going to go from $36,000 to $72,000, but now we're going to have, well, it said 5,000, right? So now we're going to have 7,000 shares of Levi's. So 72. So $72,000 divided by 5,000 shares. So we're at $14.40 per share, but Levi's is at 7. So we might want to do more, or we might want to just do some combination of calls and puts to drop the price again, right? So that we'll be obligated again to buy more Levi's. In fact, as it stands now, I'm sorry. So we own 0 Levi now. We could own 20, and then if it's horrifically bad, to get to, if we wanted to fill our $100,000 allocation block, we could buy 10,000 more shares. Yeah, let's look at that. So if we wanted to fill our allocation block and spend $100,000, we buy 10,000 more shares of Levi's, and then we're at $10 a share when Levi's is at 7. So this is, don't forget, our worst case scenario. And how much would we be down? $30,000. That's how much we'd be down on the whole position. So our risking on this thing is to be, we wouldn't be, I mean, we'd be down 30,000 whether we double down or not. But our position on here, we'd be down $30,000. And do we think we can work our way out of being down $30,000 if we have, what did I say, 7,000 shares? Wait, 10. I'm sorry, it's 10 plus. It's 5 plus 2 is 12,000. Oh, it's not 30. So it's 100,000. Because I said 5,000 shares, right? So we buy 2 blocks of 5,000 shares at 7, which is 5 times 7, 35. It's $70,000. Plus we're spending 36,000. So the actual number is 106. So it's $106,000 divided by 12,000 total shares, 883. So with the stock at 7, if we wanted to commit to it and have $100,000 worth of the stock, our net would be down to 883. So now I'm saying, so if Levi's is selling at $7, less than half the price it is now, do I want to own 100,000 shares at 883 and then sell puts and calls against it? Well, it's not an exact science, but if we look at Levi, and we say if we were selling the $16 calls now, or the 15, or so the $15 calls are $4. So at 883, at $7, we have to imagine that we should be able to get at least $2 for the $7 or $8 calls, right? We should get at least $2. It'd be very, very unlikely that we don't. And if we can get $2, that would lower our basis to 683. And that's without selling any more puts or doing anything else. So in our worst case scenario, which we, and again, it's not the worst case. The worst case is they go to 0. But if they go to 0, I'm not going to be doubling down most likely, and there's got to be something tragic happening in the company. But if the stock drops all the way down to $7, and I can accumulate it and then have sell options against it, and if I can imagine that I can sell options against that and collect 10% of the price of the stock at least every year for the next 10 years, or every 2 years for the next 20 years, let's say, I will eventually pay off the entire stock. And that will leave me with what? It'll leave me with 12,000 shares of Levi's and all my money back. That's the way you got to look at it. It's like there's a long-term thing to this, okay? And that's if this thing goes horrifically against you. If it doesn't go horrifically against you, then all we're going to do is next year, because all we're doing now all we're doing now is effectively we're buying the 15-20 spread, and we're selling 20 of the $18 puts. So if it goes against us, we're probably not even going to buy it. We're probably going to roll the $18 puts to something a little lower, maybe the $15 puts in 2025 or 2026. And then we're going to roll the $15 put, the $15 calls before. Here's the thing: if you got to roll before you lose the value. So in other words, the net of the spread is 215. So as long as we roll this before it's below 215, we're retaining the cash value of the spread. We're not losing it. All right, but we have to be able to carry the short. You have to be able to carry the short call against the new spread that we set up. That's key. So again, you want to maintain a lot of cash and margin here, but don't forget you got those short puts offsetting the short calls, so that helps on the margin also. But that's how we can effectively keep lowering and lowering and lowering the cost year after year until you end up with a portfolio full of stocks where you've recovered all your money. So I have 12,000 shares of Levi, I have 15,000 shares of Crocs, I have 20,000 shares of AT&T, you know, whatever it works out to in the end. It's the point is you have to have these allocations and say, okay, and you have to have stocks where you want to do this. That's also key though. So before you even start, you have to say, what is the worst thing I can imagine happening to this stock over the next decade? So, you know, is AT&T going to go bust? Are Crocs going to go bust? Is Levi going to go bust? And of course, somebody could. You wouldn't know it. You don't realize it. You know, Best Buy is probably the most likely one on that list that could go bust. You know, it's like I can't control what Best Buy does. They can go super out of favor. Amazon's been chewing them up. Amazon can get better at chewing them up. But Best Buy is 1/3 of all electronic sales in America. Amazon is, you know, online. Amazon kicks their ass. Amazon does triple. Amazon does triple their sales online, but including the retail sales, Best Buy is 1/3 of all electronic sales in America. And Amazon's about 1/3 also. They're almost about the same size for electronics, not for obviously all the other crap Amazon does. So Best Buy total sales, $50-60 billion. Amazon sales, $600 billion. So electronics being just a fractional part of Amazon's total sales. And they're like a giant dinosaur. They're not particularly trying to kill Best Buy, but if they just happen to move in that direction, they're going to crush them. So that's just the way it goes. See, now, Williams-Sonoma, I just, honestly, you know, rich people are still rich. And the same goes for Restoration Hardware. But I'm going to look through these one by one and figure out which ones I still think, even given the deteriorating conditions, are still good. Levi, I like. Crocs, I'll tell you, I like already. Williams-Sonoma, if they get cheaper, I certainly like them. Restoration Hardware, I like them, but the commitment, here's the problem, though. The commitment is so high, it's tough to do. Best Buy, gonna have to wait and see what kind of recession we're having. Trox, I think that's a winner. I think that's one to have. Netflix, again, now having seen the model now for the new services, I think they're okay. Ford, obviously great, but Ford didn't come down enough for me to want to jump on it again. Sony, not an emergency, so I wouldn't look at it that way. Big Lots, we already have Big Lots. I wouldn't add any more. Mittal Steel, eventually will build things again. I think that's being underplayed. Logitech, we already have, also really oversold, but Disney, if it came back to 90, I would definitely jump in. IMAX, yes, that's a yes for IMAX. Tenet Healthcare is a definite yes. I can't believe it's getting cheap again like this. And JP Morgan is JP Morgan, it's another yes. So we have several that we're going to go into with the same amount of depth as we just went into whoever it was, Levi's, and we're going to figure out whether or not we really want to play it or not. Okay, but we also have obviously about half of them got rejected, just based on the fact though that you know, if they get cheaper, they'll get more interesting. But there's no rush to jump on these things now. We have plenty of longs. You know, long-term portfolio is still full of long positions, and we don't need to jump on everything that's cheap. And we learned that lesson in 2008 because we went through that. We went through a period where we bought a lot of stuff and then it got much, much cheaper. It seemed cheap at the time, but it got a lot cheaper. So this time we're going to avoid that. And by the way, we rolled through that and managed to stay abreast of it, but that's not the point though. It's painful. When you start doing what I was talking about with Levi's, and you start taking a position that was originally 36,000 at risk, and now you're at 100,000 at risk, even though it's perfectly logical, the problem is still, if Levi's then goes from 7 to 3, you've got a big problem. Not an insurmountable problem, but again, are you going to keep playing it? Are you going to double down again? Because logically, you really have to double down again. So if you were at 850 when it was at 7, and now it goes to 3, and you buy 24,000 more shares, well, I don't know what the math is now. So let's say now you end up with 36,000 shares. So you're going to buy 24,000 more. 24,000 times $3 is 72,000 plus 106,000 we spent before is 178,000. And oh my God, what are we saying? Oh, it's painful math. 24,000 shares. So now we have 36. So divided by 36,000 shares, now you're at 494. So now you're at 5, but the stock's at 3. But again, what the hell happened? You don't do this in a vacuum. You don't automatically do it. But the thing is, what the hell could have happened to Levi? What possible thing could have gone wrong that they're at $3 a share, that they're basically being traded like a bankrupt company? I mean, essentially, people would have to stop wearing jeans after 150 years. It would have to just be a thing people don't do anymore. And certainly for my daughter and her friends, there's no sign of that happening. And again, if I own Levi's at 3 and it's at 494, I don't know if somebody can think of a $3 stock. But what's a good way to figure out a $3 stock? Well, I guess we can look at the long-term portfolio. Oh, wait, how are these guys? Who's cheap? 7, 31, 8. No. Everyone's expensive. There's a $5 stock. Here's 2. Well, that's not going to be a good example. All right, let's try the long-term portfolio. There we go. All right, so who is a $3 stock or something like that? Must be somebody in here. 730. Chimera is not a good example. Nope. Any suggestions, guys? I'm looking for a really cheap stock that's actually tradable, something that really trades, not like some bullshit thing. Oh, XM. I bet XM radio's down there. Oh no, maybe not anymore. Oh, Brendan says, do I still like Gilead? We'll find out soon. All right. Yeah, I definitely like Gilead. I think we just talked about that recently. So what was I going to say? $3 stock. Oh, are they called Siri or XM? SIRI? Sirius XM. Oh, $6 stock. All right, well, whatever. All right, let's just we need some examples. So let's do Sirius. So even a $6 stock, if you sell the I don't know if I want to do that. These are weird numbers, huh? So what happened to them? Why do they have these weird splits? Anyway, even a $6 stock, though, you can still pick up 10% if you sell the front month put the higher puts, and you can pick up. Well, I don't know if I'd want to do that, but you can do that. That's the point. I'd wait, hopefully you can do better than this. This is an ugly stock for doing it. That's also a thing. You got to pick the right time to do it. You don't want to do it when you're when you're between the strikes. You really want to sort of catch the strike right on the nose. Anyway, so bid ask. So 135, 160. So let's say it's 145. Okay. And it's 475. So 475 plus 145 is 620. That really, really thin. Wow, that's really a ripoff. I don't know why they have such terrible numbers. But anyway, so if you were in it even for $6 though, and you sell for 145, you're knocking your basis down to 440, or I'm sorry, 455. You're knocking your basis down to 455, and yeah, you get called away at 475. But the point is, if you can get out of even at that point, you're going to be happy. That's the thing. I mean, you get to a certain point if the stock is going down now. Now let's say though it goes down further. Let's say it goes down from $6 to $4. Well, good. Then the short puts that you sold for 140 expire worthless, and yeah, you've lost net 60 cents. But you know what? Again, you're not doing it because you think that they're never going to go up. If you didn't believe in the stock, we wouldn't be messing around with it in the first place. And each time we make a move, we evaluate it again and decide what we're going to do. Like Levi's today, we just went over Levi and said, let's spend the money and roll down. And now we're going to take the 1150 we put in originally and spend another $7,000 on rolling it down to a much more serious position. Because rather than look at Levi going down and say, oh my God, it went down, we got to get out of this position, we're like, oh my God, it went down, let's take a bigger position. That's when we're starting to commit that capital. And it's out of the allocation block. So the allocation block, the amount of allocation doesn't change. Except the cash commitment is going up, but the put commitment, the amount that we could get assigned to us, is the same. So all we're doing is adding now, out of 36,000 we could be assigned at, we are now rolling down the long calls. And I talked about this, and because we're rolling down the long calls, we have a bigger spread. Because we have a bigger spread, we're now free to start selling some short calls. Because we have 50 long. So if we sell 20 short calls, it's not going to damage us much. Plus the puts offset the calls that we sell. So it's not very margin intensive to start selling some calls. We recoup quite a lot of money. We can recoup how many days? January, 140 days. So 140 out of 500, we're recouping $3,000 on Levi's. We're not doing it yet. We're waiting until the numbers are right. But we're looking to recoup $3,000 in one of 3 shops. Now, if we end up taking $9,000 back, that's the entire $8,000 we spent to roll it down. So even if it doesn't work, we're still back to having the position at net $1,000. And if we're back to having the position at $1,000 and it goes down another 50%, then we could do the same thing again. And unless the stock goes actually bankrupt, we will be in this great position with all our money off the table. That's the key to the whole thing. But it's got to be stocks. You have to reevaluate it every time. We do have a commitment. We have a commitment for owning 2,000 shares. But in reality, let's get back to Levi. See how bad the indexes look. Oh, yep, getting much worse. Wow, this is so sad. Anyway, all right, so getting back to Levi. If, for example, Levi's at $16.85. So let's say that we had sold the $18 puts. Let's say we sold the $20 puts. Let's say we sold the $20 puts a couple of years ago, and now they're $3, $3.30, right? We sold them for $2. They're only down $1, $1.10, whatever. So we sold them for $1. Now what we do is go down and say, well, what's $3 here? Look, the $18 puts are more than $3. So we could roll down to the $18 puts and put some money in our pocket, or we could take some money out of our pocket, something like $1, and we would pay $2,000, right? We have 20 short puts. We could pay $2,000 and roll to the $15 puts. So we would knock the put strike from 20 to 15 doing the roll, and it would cost us $2,000. So now we're not in for $11.50 cash, we're in for $32.50 cash on the spread. But if that happening means that that Levi never came back, that means that all the short calls we sold would expire worthless, and therefore, so either the puts are going to expire worthless or the short calls will expire worthless. Can't be both. Can't have neither. So if the short calls expire worthless and we pick up $6,000, or I'm sorry, $9,000, we pick up $9,000, then what do we have? We have a position that every 2 years generates $9,000 and we paid nothing for it. And we've had terrible luck and the stock kept going down, but we still have no cost basis or very, very little cost basis. We only have to get lucky once or twice and all of a sudden this thing becomes a money machine. And once you reduce your cost basis to zero, anything you do to generate an income off of it is all gravy. Because you've got all your money back, putting it to work somewhere else. And even if Levi is $1 and you're selling short calls for 15 cents, you're still making a ton of money. So that's why, as long as we're always doing the math forward and thinking about, can I generate income off of this? Is this going to be worth holding? Is this a good stock for the future? Is it going to come back? What's the chances? So on and so forth. And again, this goes back to when we had the big crash in 2008 and 2009, and I would say to people, because you're looking at companies like Ford was like $2 at the time. Bank of America was $5. I remember that was our stock of the year in 2009, or 2010. I think it's 2010. So Bank of America was our stock of the year because it was $5. I was like, you kidding me? I'm like, Bank of America's $5. That was the first time we ever did a stock of the year. In fact, I wrote an article saying you could just take your entire portfolio and put it into Bank of America. It turned out like it went up like 300% that year. I said just take every penny you have and put it in Bank of America. This is our one stock. I think I had like a Lord of the Rings thing, like a one stock to for your whole portfolio. I'm like they're not going to let Bank of America go bankrupt. It's Bank of America. It's like they are not going to allow this thing to go down. Also, there was no reason they didn't have the loan portfolio they had wasn't as crazy as other people, and it was just insane. But again, things get put down to ridiculous prices. You can't help that. But what you can do is you can ride it out, and if you have a plan to ride it out and stick with it over time, and you maintain your allocations and you have good hedges, these things work to our advantage. It's fantastic that we can buy these stocks so cheaply, but you've got to be able to buy them. You can't just stare at them. And the way to do that, though, is to be conservative. And even when we're buying these stocks, even when you see Bank of America at $5, you still have to say to yourself, I will buy a quarter of an allocation block to start. That means it can drop 50%. And with my next quarter, I can buy twice as much. And it can drop 50% again. And then I can spend the rest of my allocation block to buy twice as much of that. So in other words, not that. So in other words, if I can find a comment box. Oh, no, that's not where it is. La da da, there it is. Okay. So let's say you buy, and again, just, it doesn't matter what it is. 1,000 BAC at 5 equals $5,000, right? So it goes down to 250. So now you buy 2,000. Where's my button? Boy, you set your fingers in the wrong place and never can't get it back. There it is. 2,000, maybe it's just me. 2,000 BAC at 250 equals 5,000. And then 4,000. No, I'm sorry. You can actually do it again. because you know, if you set aside, if this is a quarter of an allocation block, you have $20,000. So then let's say that at 125, we've got 10,000 left. So then we can do 8,000 BAC at 1.25 equals, that's 10,000. Okay, so that means that we have we spent $20,000 divided by 11,000 shares of BAC. Whoa, that can't be right. $20,000 divided by 11,000. 181. So it's at 125, and this is a complete disaster. It dropped 50%, and then it dropped another 50% on us. All right. So now we're in for 181, 182. So let's say 182. 182 a share. But we didn't do that though, because didn't we sell calls to lower our basis? Didn't we sell puts to lower our basis? So if we're rolling the puts and rolling the calls and selling more puts and selling more calls, unless it drops so drastically that the puts burn us and we can't recover, we're just going to keep selling puts and calls. So this 182 is going to be a low price, possibly less than 125 net cost by the time we're at this. And that's with the stock falling 75% on us. So we're able to withstand a 75% drop in the stock. So unless the thing is actually going bankrupt, we are able to recover from all sorts of horrible things using the system. But the key is you're scaling it. And the key is also to be disciplined. In other words, even here, I might say, you know what, why don't we just buy 4,000 and keep 5,000 in reserve? Because what if it goes to 60 cents? Then I really want my $5,000. You know, now what we actually do though is usually by this point, I would be like, this is 75% down and this is stupid. But then we just say, okay, if it goes down another 50%, we're going to take another $10,000 and, you know, we're just going to go over our allocation. But the thing is, when you're doing that, you have to do triage on your portfolio and say, okay, we did this in 2008 and 9. We're like, okay, who are we going to stick with and who are we going to dump? Because you can't stick with everybody as much as you want to. You got to start picking out stocks that you feel are really, really going to bottom and you know, are going to be the bulletproof kind of things. And it's, again, the same thing I was talking about back then is the same thing. The blue chips, the thing, people are going to drive cars. People, you know, if the world blows up tomorrow, if you're like living in the Ukraine and everything around you is being bombed and blown up and there's no electricity and this and that, and your job, your work is gone, and who knows what's going to happen tomorrow and blah, blah, blah. What are you going to do? Okay, you're going to get up. You're going to get up. You're going to have breakfast. You're going to send your kids to school or some kind of school or do something with the kids. It's like, you know, you're not going to like just huddle them in a hole. I mean, you know, it depends how bad the war is, but if it's that bad, then you do huddle them in a hole. But still, somebody's got to eat. Somebody's got to wear clothes. Somebody's got to have toilet paper when they go to the bathroom. And whatever it takes, you're going to go out and make the money to make that happen. And just doing that, you are creating what? $5,000 of GDP, $10,000 of GDP for the year. Just you're eking out that minimum, basically going to a minimum wage job and doing whatever it takes to make some money. You'll sign up for the freaking, at a certain point, you'll sign up for the freaking army if they're going to send you a paycheck. Why do you think people go to the army? It's a paycheck. You will have an economy. You will be an economy. You are not going, you know, you will go down fighting rather than have your kids have no clothes and no this and no that. And they don't want to sit in an empty apartment. They don't want to have no lights. They don't want to have no TV, no radio, no nothing, no internet, no phone. There are things you're going to buy. No matter how bad things get, you are going to have your priority list of things that you have to have. And so when you look at the companies that provide those things, those are the ones to stick with. No matter how bad the global economy gets, they're going to still be there. And they may not make as much money, and they may have a rough patch and so on and so forth, but you know what? Same with a bank. You will have money. You will need a bank, even if it's not much money. You still need somewhere to put it. You need a debit card to transact. You need to be able, you either need to carry cash, and you're not going to want to carry all your cash, or you get robbed or whatever. So you're going to want to carry some cash. You don't want to leave your cash at home. You know, so eventually you just need a bank, and the bank is going to have a business where they have an ATM or a credit card, and you will charge goods and services. No matter how bad things get, you're still going to do that. Those transactions will still exist, and therefore those people will make money. If you don't work immediately where you live, you may want to have a car and drive. If the roads are all blown up where you live, you may have to find an alternative to that. You may need a bike. But somehow you've got to get to your job, you've got to make your money, you've got to feed your family, you've got to find the groceries, you've got to put a blanket on the kids. When they get sick, you're going to get them some kind of medicine or something like that. There are certain things that have to happen. And is it possible for them not to happen? Of course it is. Look at Africa. It's possible to be so poor that that doesn't happen. But do you really think that's what's going to happen to this society? And if that's not going to happen, then you have to take zero off the table. Zero is not a thing. And if zero is off the table, then where are we? So when stocks start going to these ridiculous, and I'm not talking about where we are now, I'm talking about when you see Bank of America at $1.25 or whatever, proportionally, when you see stocks down 75% that are not like Walmart. Like if you see Walmart down 75%, Netflix is down, God knows, close to that probably. What was Netflix? Yeah, 70 to 200. So what, 73, 50, 125. 125 would be 75% down from the top. But that's from the top. They never should have been that much. But they're down 50% from 500, basically. So Netflix is now 50% down from where it was. Could they go down another 50%? Sure, they could. But unless something really drastically changes, I imagine if Netflix is down 50%, then all the media companies will be down, and that means that Netflix is going to be able to negotiate much cheaper content deals, and that will be beneficial to them. And they may have to, and they may be able to actually pass on savings to people and lower prices and still make money. And the question is, I mean, look, if push comes to shove, I know with my kids, they'll have a phone. If they had to make a choice, first of all, the phone. Under no circumstances whatsoever are they giving up the phone. And neither will most of us, right? I mean, that's just something that no matter what, you're like, well, okay, it's costing $200 a month, but you know, God damn it, we're going to have our AT&T service. There's no way. Or maybe you go to T-Mobile or something, but you're going to have some kind of service, and you're going to have a freaking phone that can answer questions when you ask it. Because imagine going back to not having that. That'd be weird, right? You know, what's the score in the game? I don't know. Can I make a reservation here? I don't know. What's their phone number? I don't know. What's the weather going to be like? I don't know. Oh, it's hysterical. How weird that we used to live like that, right? We didn't know things. Like you couldn't answer any questions. Somebody alive or dead? I don't know. So many like things that you used to talk about are like answered too easily. It's a funny thing. I've had some friends we have a no phone rule for like having conversations, because it's kind of annoying when you're having a conversation and speculating about stuff, and then somebody goes bip bip bip, and they're like, no, it's like this. No fun. Anywho, so plenty of stocks. You have to think in terms of a total disaster. You have to think in terms of like what still is needed. What's going to be done no matter what. And you know, we're not in a war. We aren't being blown up. Even in Ukraine, though, their economy's down 15%, 20%. They're being blown to bits. They're being attacked constantly. Their roads are being torn up, bridges being blown up, towns are being occupied. That's 15 to 20% down. We're just annoyed that the prices are rising. It's so funny. Can you imagine like telling someone from the Ukraine like how upset we are about the economy? It's like, it's just too funny. Anyway, all right. So Brendan said, do you still like Gilead? Yes, I like Gilead. Gilead's got a pipeline. They're a cash machine. They're a nice big pharma. I don't know how they're doing lately, but you know, as far as long term, sure. I mean, it's one of the great pharmaceutical companies and well worth buying. And Wayne says, is there an argument for the S&P not to fail between 3,100 and 3,300? I see the target as an overshoot of a downward reversion of the mean. The drop takes us back to September of 2020. That seems a possible target to me. Let's see. I think look, you can't stop people from panicking. So, you know, you're talking about technicals and overshoot and that. But look, we're already here. This isn't a long enough chart, of course, but we're already here on the RSI. We're already coming down fast and hard on the MACD line. It's going to be, I mean, once you get to a level like this, it's really, you're kind of running out of sellers. That's the thing. It doesn't take much of an excuse for people to start buying. So on the other hand, I was talking about the negatives that I was looking at in the next 5 months. There's also not so anything worse. What worse is going to happen? And I talked about a couple of things the other day. I said, when I was on TV on Bloomberg the other day, I said, like, what do you think? The guy said, what do you think would cause it to break below your levels? And I said, well, really, something horrible, like, you know, the atomic plant that the Russians are, the nuclear plant, atomic, I'm like from the 50s, the nuclear plant that the Russians are occupying could blow up or have a disaster of some sort. But I mean, there's a good way to contaminate hundreds of miles of land, right? They learned that in Chernobyl. That's a nice way to render a country uninhabitable after you leave. It's like scorched earth. They just go, oops, you know, sorry, accident. There's that. There's monkeypox mutating into something that's very spreadable. That would be nasty. It's a very not nice disease, and it would be very horrible if it starts spreading more effectively than it is now. And of course, our complete lack of response and inadequate everything, even after 2 years of COVID, we still have the worst response in the world. It's just incredible how we like absolutely just blow everything about controlling diseases. And again, it's the lack of a healthcare system. That's really what it is. We don't have it set up so that people can just walk into the doctor and make sure everything is covered, nor do we have doctors who are incentivized to prevent these things. And they're privatizing the vaccines now. That's going to be interesting. Anyway, so, you know, those are things that could get worse. Again, the prolonged war in the Ukraine, oil and gas prices are a wild card. They're down now, so who knows? Oh, that's interesting. Is that what's happening? Are oil prices? They should have been up. Oh, no, they failed anyway. Wow. So I'd say the oil sector has got to be dragging us down because we had a little run up to 91, but now we fell back to 89. That's scary for the oil people. That is certainly not good. But anyway, on the whole, I think that unless something new and horrible happens, I think we've seen the panic. I think we've seen what the lows look like. And, you know, the people who want to get out of the market are mostly out of the market. And of course, some people jump right back in and now they're all disappointed, they're getting back out and whatever. But it settles down. And after a while, see, that's the thing. After a while, you end up selling to the value buyers. And there aren't as many of us as there used to be, but eventually the patient money people come in and buy things and hold them, and they don't really care anymore about what the panic is or what people are saying and so on and so forth, because of that simple rationale. And you're either going to believe it or you're not. So I've laid out my case for, like, you know, you're either going to believe that, you know, even a guy sitting there being bombed in the Ukraine and his job and his factory blew up and there's no work anymore and whatever, and there's no electricity in the town and this and that, he's still got to get some shoes on his kids' feet. And some of those shoes are going to be Crocs, and some of those jeans are going to be Levi's, and some of the, you know, and he's going to subscribe to one of the major phone carriers so he can call somebody. Otherwise, how are you going to get a job anyway? If you don't have a phone, and also if you don't have a computer and you can't do a resume and all, you know, there's a million justifications for having that phone service for whatever it is it costs, $100 a month, $50 a month, whatever it is for the cheapest kind. You know, it's a necessity in life. How are you going to function without it? I mean, you can go to somebody else, you know, your friend's house and sit down and use their internet and use their computer, but that's what being, you know, that's what being homeless is, pretty much. So if things are that bad, that's what you're going to do. But you know what? Your friend's going to pay money for the phone and the computer. Somebody's going to do it, not nobody. You know, I mean, if you go to like really poor, dirt poor countries like Thailand, Thailand's not dirt poor, but Thailand's poor. You know, a poor country, the poor Asian countries that are like Thailand, and everything there is about a third of what it costs here. You can live a fabulous life on what we call minimum wage here. You have a fabulous income as far as they're concerned. We're doing this marijuana project in Thailand, and these guys, these farm people, not the farm owners, but the farm hands, $25 a day. They're like, holy shit, you're really going to pay us $25 a day? And we're like, we're kind of embarrassed to pay less. You know, and we do a presentation for the venture capital guys, and we say we're paying these guys $25 a day, and they're like, what? Is that legal? And we're like, you know, it's like you can't pay them less. They literally would. They would work for $10 or $12 a day. But we're paying good wages because it's ridiculous not to. The economics of it, it just, you know, it's just wrong not to do it. Also, the government loves us for it, so that's important too. We're getting favors. You know, because we're effectively, it's considered a good paying job. And that's minimum wage, right? $600 a month they end up with. They're happy. You can get a fabulous apartment, and you can eat out, you can go to movies, and you can live an actual life for $600 a month over there. It is crazy. I know when I was in Thailand a couple of years ago, my favorite drink was $1. It's like, because they had these stands all over, and I was drinking this, it was like a Thai tea. It was $1. Anywhere you go, buck. Just always a stand, always a place to get it. $1. And I don't even stand like a guy on like the bum in Vegas selling it on the street. I mean, it's like, you know, these were like, it was always a stand, like a little, you know, booth with, you know, power and all kinds of stuff on the menu. And they were, you know, everywhere, and everybody always carried this thing because it was a very popular drink. And I was so amazed. It was like $1. I was like, this is just so silly. It's like, I can't believe that they function like this. But it's weird, and it is weird because we're all on the same planet. So how come they can get this for that much and we can't? But that's a lot of embedded costs that cause that to happen. But anyway, so wrapping up, bottom line, all we're doing is moving around in a range that we expected. We're in a bit of the lower range right now because people are very wary of the Fed tightening. But like I said, it's math. We're going to be at 3% in 3 weeks. Okay, they said 3.5 to 4%. So they only have another 1% left to tighten. So even if they raise 50 basis points at the next 2 meetings, they would be at the upper end of their range for next year. That's very aggressive. But if that's very aggressive, then the chance of them tightening 75 points again after this one is very slim. Even if they think inflation is higher than they think, even if they don't think it's under control, they still have to be taking a step back and saying, let's take one pause, and I don't mean a pause, I mean a pause to say 50 instead of 75. Let's take one pause to see what happens. So I think that now people are over fearing the Fed and over fearing the markets, and they think it's going to over tighten. And again, this oil collapse is because of even the oil supply. It's not as tight as everybody thinks it is. You know, in Europe, they have 85% of their natural gas reserves are still there. So they're only down 15%. You don't want to be down 15%, but they're down 15%. And if Russia cuts them off, that 85% will go down very quickly. But they do have 85% of their reserves. We are ramping up production. We're happy to ramp up production of natural gas. Believe me, there's a lot of people in this country who are licking their chops. I mean, all the thing about Marcellus Shale and all these different places where we get natural gas, and as you know, we have like 200 years worth of natural gas in this country. All these people who are all excited about the natural gas in this country, they were excited about selling it here for $2.50 and $3 when they started building the Marcellus Shale projects and things like that. Now they're exporting this stuff and getting $5, $6 to send it out. They don't get $8 because that's what the retail is, but they're getting $5, $6 sending this stuff out of the country. It's double what they thought they would get, and the extra 100% is all profit. It's a huge business. You look at the profitability of these companies. Look at a refiner. Well, it's different than natural gas, but I got to stop after this. But VLO. So you look at Valero. Look at this: 2 million, 4 million, 3 million, 2 million, lost money in 2020 for whatever. 10, not million, billion, $10 billion. They think it's going to calm down next year. $10 billion. They're not refining more stuff. It's the same stuff they always refined. It's the same amount. They haven't added more facilities. They're just selling the same stuff for like so much more money. And then if we look at LNG, right? Oh, I was just saying how we should have just stuck with these guys. When they were starting, we bought them and I was really into them, but then they got so expensive I lost interest. So yeah, so like here, I was really into these guys because it was like, to me, I was like, this is definitely the future. No, there's no doubt to me this is going to be the future. Then they got up here and we were like, okay, that's that. And we're done. And we never went back in. It went back down. We never really got back into LNG again. But we caught that first wave that went crazy. And I just lost interest in it, frankly. But meanwhile, had we just held on, it would have been up there. Anyhow, so LNG, same thing. They weren't making any money. They were still investing phase here, made some money here, lost money in 2020. You can't blame people for that. Well, I don't know what happened in 2021. I mean, obviously we were all shut down and stuff, but weird. But now the exporting is kicked in and we're sending all our gas to Europe, and 2.3 billion, 3.7 billion. You know, it's freaking fantastic. But even that, it's only the 40. They're still valued at 40 billion. It's like that's why, because even 4 billion at 40 billion is barely catching up, and this isn't going to last. So that's why we stopped playing with them, because this is exactly why. This is what happened to them. You know, they were just ahead of themselves for a long time. But anyway, so and we can look at other companies, but the concept is the same across the oil. Well, let's look at it. Take a look at Exxon. Well, let's look at Chevron. Chevron does more gas. So here's Chevron, 9, 14, 3, obviously COVID. 15 billion. No. 15 billion. Wow, that's a lot. No, it's not. 36 billion freaking dollars. All of a sudden, they're making $36 billion. It's, again, the same. They did not start pumping more oil, selling more. It's the same stuff for much, much more money. And you would think that they would explode in stock price, but they don't, because everybody's looking ahead and saying this can't last, cannot last. Because once you get to $100 a tank for gasoline, people can't afford it. Habits have to change. That's what happens. And it's not everybody. Maybe it's not you, but some people, some percentage of the people make a drastic decision and stop driving their car, start using more public transportation, start carpooling. It seems like nothing, but 2%, 3% makes a huge difference. You know, globally, we produce 100 million barrels of oil a day. So if 3% of the people, if 3% less people or 3% less fuel is used or oil is used because people cut back, that's 3 million barrels a day, 21 million barrels a week of oil that starts piling up somewhere. Doesn't take long before that's a ridiculous glut. The entire strategic petroleum reserve of the United States is about 1 billion barrels. So imagine like having to find somewhere to put 1 billion barrels when you're piling up 20 million barrels a week. So all of a sudden, people cut prices, people cut production, things go offline. It's a constant mess. What we're suffering from now also, though, on the oil side is very much underinvestment. You know, for years, because of solar and because we thought that we were scaling down our oil production and because people got concerned, we have not really invested much in oil production in the US in a long time, oil or natural gas. We've been very underinvested. And now it's ramping up again very quickly. People are starting to put wells in the ground. You know, because we need to produce more. Even though we're producing record amounts right now, we need to produce more to keep up with the demand in Europe. But you know what's going to happen though, and we're draining ourselves dry. We're producing so much oil here that we're going to be completely out of oil in 20 years or so. Completely out of oil. We'll have no oil left. We're just selling it all now because we're getting paid a lot of money for it. So hopefully in 20 years we won't need it anymore. Hopefully. Because if we time it wrong, we're pretty screwed. Anyway, so hopefully next week we will not be lower. That would be nice. You can't tell from today's action though, because it looks horrible. Oh, look, we're bouncing. Yay. Okay. Anyway, so I do think that we shouldn't get too much worse. And I think tomorrow, the productivity report can't be worse. I don't see how it could be. I really can't. I really should not be worse than last month. It just, we've had terrible signs. We've had terrible reports that are contributors to productivity. It's possible that it could be worse than we think, but last month was so terrible. It looked like an error. It looked like a data error. There's just no, I don't see how that can be real. So hopefully not. And if so, then hopefully that would cause the Fed to ease off a little bit because, you know, that's bad. You can't be down 17% productivity. Can't. If that's a trend, then we're in big trouble. So we'll see. Anyway, thanks for all coming. I appreciate it. And we will do this again next week. All right. So take care, folks.